Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be talking to you here today. And we just heard a really inspirational talk about the future. My talk about the future is a little bit different because I'm focusing on biodiversity. And biodiversity underpins everything it means to be human and everything that we do. But we are losing it at an alarming rate. And some of the biggest and most charismatic species in the world are some of the ones most under threat. And so I'm going to be talking to you today particularly about big cats. So why big cats? Big cats have inspired people for as long as humans have existed. The very first figurative art up here on the left there is called the Lowenmensch. And this is carved out of woolly mammoth ivory about 40,000 years ago. And it's the head of a lion on the body of a human. So from the very first time that humans started to mold themselves, they were deeply intertwined with big cats. The same further on the right here are cave paintings in France from about 30,000 years ago. These are extensive tableaus of cave lions doing the same kind of interactions that you would see if you went out into the Serengeti today. So for as long as people have existed, they have valued big cats. And that has gone all the way through the millennia right to the current day. If you walked around Abingdon, you would see lots of images of big cats. They are shown on sports teams, they're on flags, they're on our heraldry, they're even on the sort of door knocker of 10 Downing Street. They are really ubiquitous in human culture. And that's because they have real value. They don't just have value to us in our heads, they have real value in multiple different ways. They have great economic value to the range countries where they occur through things like phototourism and trophy hunting. They also have really important ecological value. You know that if you have a species like a lion that is still persisting in an ecosystem, then you have all the things under it that enable that cat to be there. You have enough prey, you have enough space, you have enough human tolerance to enable it to survive. And also they have really important existence value. Even if you are never lucky enough to be out there and see a lion in the wild or a tiger in the wild, there is something really deeply satisfying to know that we live in a world that is still wild enough that these animals can roam free. But despite all those values, these animals are declining fast. So species like cheetahs have disappeared from over 90% of their historic range. The same is true for lions. Lions have halved in about the time the first Lion King film came out. So when the revamped Lion King film came out, lion populations had declined by around half, despite the immense global value that people have always put on them through time. And so this just to give you a more of a visual. This is the historic range of lions as they used to occur. So this is around 1890. We don't know how many lions there were. There wasn't anyone counting them at that point. But we know that by the 1970s, their range had really fragmented down. And there were already kernels of populations, particularly in southern and eastern Africa, where they tended to have more connected, secure populations and were being more fragmented in the rest of their range. By 2020, this looks much worse. You can see how much that range has disappeared. And again, those hotspots shown here in the sort of the bluey green show that those are the only really secure populations. Our current estimate is that most lion populations have fewer than 100 in them, and there are only 6 that have at least 1,000 lions left. So this animal that has literally been a part of humankind for as long as we can remember is in real peril. So what's causing this? The main reasons behind this decline in this most iconic cat are things like the loss of wild habitat, the loss of wild prey, and conflict with people as humans and big cats coexist ever more tightly. And so I'm part of a group called Lion Landscapes, and we work to address these key threats in 3 different countries, 4 main landscapes, 2 in southern Tanzania, 1 in central Kenya, and 1 in the Luangwa Valley in Zambia. And so one thing that people don't recognize with the lions, in addition to how quickly and how severely they've declined, is how much they rely on land alongside local people. So they rely on some very, very important land around protected areas where people are living often in abject poverty. Most people in these areas are living on less than $1 a day. They don't have access to good nutrition, Western medical care, life expectancy is low, so these people are extremely vulnerable. Then you put them beside these iconic wildlife populations and expect them to live alongside some of the most significant big cat populations left on the planet, and it causes conflict with them. This is a man who's he had 3 cattle. One of his cattle was killed by a lion. He went out and put poison there, killed 3 lions, and it's bad for both lions and people and wildlife. And this leads to huge amounts of wildlife killing. In our study site in southern Tanzania, in Ruaha, this is the highest recorded rate of lion killing known in modern times in East Africa. We had 25 lions killed just around our camp in a single year, so huge amounts of killing. Now, obviously, if this kind of killing is going on, it's vital to understand why. And when we talked to people, they said, you've got to speak to the Barabaig. This is a tribe that is related to the Maasai, but they are very secretive and hostile to outsiders. We spent 2 years trying to break through with the Barabaig. They wouldn't deal with it at all. And then we put up our solar panels to charge our laptops, and the Barabaig turned up to charge their mobile phones. They use their phones for the same thing that all of us do, WhatsApp and memes, but tracking livestock prices, etc. But they explained to us what was driving this conflict. An obvious one is a tax on livestock. Another one is that people don't get benefits from this wildlife, and those benefits that do come are inequitably distributed. Another one is cultural reasons. The warriors felt a real status and got wealth and status from going out and killing lions. And the last was a lack of cultural awareness, a lack of awareness about why these animals were declining and the fact that they were imperiled globally. So we've been working to reduce all of these threats. The first and the easiest one is reducing attacks. 2/3 of attacks happen in poorly constructed livestock enclosures, so we reinforce them with wire. These look fairly rubbish, and what you don't want to do, though, they prevent about 95% of attacks. Even though they look bad, they're really good at preventing attacks. But what you don't want to do is protect livestock at night and then release them in the morning to hungrier carnivores. So then we placed specialized livestock guarding dogs. These look cute. When you give them to someone, they're like, have you seen a lion? A lion is going to think that's a canapé. But actually, they grow into big, intimidating dogs. And these are another sort of toolkit for reducing attacks. But no one will put up with big cats if they're just a slightly reduced problem. You need to make these animals a benefit to local people. And so we worked with communities to find out what their benefits they would appreciate from the presence of wildlife. And their top priorities were education, veterinary medicine, and healthcare, the same as anyone would choose. So we worked to twin local schools, provide them educational equipment, scholarships. This is the only time we went against the local community because they said they didn't want girls to have the scholarships. They said girls will get pregnant. There's no point educating them, but we've specifically given half of those to girls, and that's been really important in changing the views towards girls and supporting them through college. The porridge project is a really important one because you can take children to school, but if they're not eating at school, they're not going to actually have the educational attainment. So this is a really important aspect of getting children to school and to learn while they're there. And also investing particularly in maternal and neonatal healthcare, because those are huge killers of both women and babies and was really important to the community. We also invest in giving veterinary care to people because livestock are hugely important assets. But all of this was happening, and people would wave at us, and they would think we were nice, and we felt pretty happy, and people were still killing lions. And obviously, this was because the wildlife benefits were coming from the project, not the presence of wildlife. So we developed a program where they would put camera traps out, where we would be using for wildlife monitoring, but they would get benefits directly from the wildlife presence. And this was done on a number of points. So it took a long time to work with the community, but they would develop a certain number of points for each animal. So a small antelope, say like a dick would get 1,000 points. A monkey or a baboon would get 1,500 points. We give more points if they're more threatened or more conflict-causing species. So a lion would get 15,000 points. The top spot was an African wild dog at 20,000 points. And because it's per individual, this image got them 340,000 points. And those points then translate into additional healthcare, education, and veterinary benefits. For the cultural aspects, we said to them, we can engage you as warriors, and we have a warrior employment program, but what could possibly replace that status of killing a lion? And they said the only thing that can do it is learning to read or write, because no one can do that. So we've got a warrior literacy program. All of these guys are now numerate and literate. And the women have said, we used to want our girls to marry the lion killers because they were the guys going places, but now we want them to marry the lion defenders because those are the ones who have a bright future. And for awareness, it's as simple as taking people into the park. These people all live around the national park but can't access it because they don't have a car, they don't have money. And taking people in, the number one thing we hear is people say, I didn't know lions could be gentle. When they see them with their cubs, it transforms their view of these species. And also showing them amazing wildlife films, the sorts that all of us see here. But unfortunately, these tend to be in English. And no matter how nice the imagery, the lesson from that, the subliminal lesson, is this is not your story, this is not for you. So we've addressed that by writing our own storybooks with the communities that are in their languages. And this is huge. It's such a small thing, but it makes them recognize that it's their story and their place in it is truly central. And we're focused very strongly on building African capacity. It has to be Africans, for things like lion conservation, that their voices are heard, that they take this forward if they want these species there long term. And we know this has a positive impact. We've seen in our core areas attacks on livestock decline by over 60%. And importantly, as conservationists, we've seen killings of these big cats decline by over 80%. But the most important thing is that we are now seen as a valued part of the local community. This has gone from people not talking to us for 2 years to really seeing us as a central asset that listens to them, that can actually empower them. And it's not all perfect. There are many, many ups and downs, but it's us learning from each other and how can we form a stronger partnership in the future. We're looking now to scale up across both southern Tanzania and beyond. We've started working in Salou. This place is bigger than Switzerland, extremely remote, lots of different issues. But that same core tenet of listening to people and understanding their problems and their needs, I think has to be fundamental to developing long-term conservation. We can't scale up endlessly ourselves, so we work with great partners who all deal with similar issues. We've come together collectively to form the Pride Lion Conservation Alliance, and together we've focused a lot on empowering African conservation leadership, particularly leadership amongst women, because they tend to be really the change makers and the drivers in a lot of communities. So making sure that they really, again, have their voices listened to and their skills built on. And the take-home message from all of this is that although it can seem so depressing when we look at that event horizon for nature, we see the declining wildlife, but we can see change. If that change is specific, if that change is locally driven and respectful of different views and opinions, and is grounded around what human needs, then it can translate into truly a better future for wildlife and for people. And for that to happen, it needs all of us to come together. We've seen that big cats were a global asset. They've been part of humanity for as long as we can remember. And so we all need to come together as a global community to make sure that they persist, and that in doing so, in delivering conservation, we really deliver that better space and that better future for people as well as for wildlife. Thank you very much.